Hello friends, so today we are going to talk about four Gospels with respect to their timeline and how people grew in their interest in Christology. So I'm going to do it via a graph, and here we have the graph, and let me take the x-axis to be the timeline in which the books are written, and y-axis to be the Christological interest. So let me take first timeline 60 AD, and then you have 70 AD, after that 90 AD, then finally 110 AD. So they believe that the Gospel of Mark was written in the year 66 AD, and in this junction I have Mark. Okay, and then the Matthew's Gospel of Matthew is written between 70 to 90 AD. So let me have Matthew here in this junction, and then finally you have Luke. So there is much debate about it, but between 70 to 90 AD we have that. And then finally you have the Gospel of John. In the y-axis, the interest. What do you mean by interest? In Christology, how much people got to know about Christ, or how much they showed interest on Christ. So when you study the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, you will see Christ to be an adult. There is no Christmas story in the Gospel of Mark, and Christ comes into the scene as an adult, and he does a lot of work and drives out the demons, and understood by the wrong people. The demons got to know that he is the Son of God, whereas the disciples were struggling to get to know about it. Sometimes it's like that, right? So the powers of darkness know about God's authority, but we as believers underestimate the authority of God. And then you see in the book of Matthew, you will see in the y-axis, people got to know a little bit more about Christ. What is that? Genealogy of Christ. They got to know the birth of Christ. They got to know about it. Herod killing the babies and trying to kill baby Christ, and all these things. So people got to know a little more about Christ, and look at the understanding that in that they grew, right? So they became part of the written record, and they got to know about it. And what about Luke's time? Luke's time you have a little bit more growth. Here you got to know about the birth of John the Baptist. Nobody else talks about it, right? So birth of John the Baptist is spoken by Luke. He speaks about Zachariah and Elizabeth, and Zachariah going into the temple offering incense. The birth of John the Baptist is known, and the forerunner, one step before, how did Christ comes into the scene? Isaiah chapter 40, behold the voice that cries in the wilderness, and look at the understanding that grew a little bit more about Christ as a Messiah who was introduced by John the Baptist. And let's talk about the Gospel of John, and he goes one step further. What is that he is taking us to? He is talking about a pre-incarnate Christ. What do you mean by pre-incarnate Christ? Before the incarnation of Christ, who was Christ? In the beginning was the Word. You remember John 1:1, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he is giving us an introduction from the about the eternality of Christ. And Christ was not created, and he existed before he became flesh. And he is talking about Christ as the I am, the self-existing one. So people grew in their understanding about Christ. How about you? Right? Are you growing in your understanding of Christ? Peter is saying we all should grow, 2 Peter 3:18, in the grace and knowledge of Christ. So when you read a verse, don't come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, I know this verse. Let's grow in the understanding of Christ. I love what Paul says in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10. And this is his goal. And what is that? I may know him, the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, and being conformed to his death. And there is a superb way by which the Gospels are written, and unique way. Mark writes it from the adulthood, Matthew writes it, okay, one step before genealogy of Christ, and Luke says, okay, I will include genealogy as well as how about birth of Christ, John the Baptist. And then John says, let's go all the way back, pre-incarnate Christ. Were they growing in the interest of Christology, and were they growing in the doctrine of Christ? Yes. That's how the books are written, and that's how God wants us to be also. So thank you so much. With this thought, I leave you. God bless you. Have a great day.